Alberta's Crow's Nest Pass is a place of breathtaking beauty, but is the scene of one of the great natural disasters in North American history. An archaeologist had traveled to the Crow's Nest Pass to study the site of the Frank Slide, the largest ever rock avalanche which killed 130 people. Looking for remnants and artifacts, the archaeologist felt as if someone was watching him. Soon, he made a fascinating but eerie discovery: the visible remains of one of the town's former residents. And again, the feeling of being watched came over him. As night fell in the Crow's Nest Pass, he decided to make camp and study his findings for the day. As he worked, he suddenly felt as if he was not alone. He looked up to find a menacing figure wielding a pickaxe, staring back at him. More figures began to appear on the ridgeline, and then just as quickly, they disappeared into the darkness. Suddenly, he was again all alone at the scene of the Frank Slide.
Many feel that a ghost is a result of a life brutally ended without warning. Lost and confused, these spirits may be glimpsed at the scene of their deaths. In Alberta's Crow's Nest Pass, not one person, but an entire town's population was killed in seconds, and many still glimpse these victims at Frank Slide Rocks.
The area where the Frank Slide occurred is beautiful, but unsettling. Beneath the shadow of Turtle Mountain still lay the bodies of many of the unfortunate victims of the disaster.
I'm here at the Frank Slide Interpretive Center. My name is Kathy Pizzoni. I'm the program coordinator here. Frank was one of the very first coal mining towns that was established in this part of Western Canada. It was a rough and tumble type of place. Most of the people that lived there were immigrants, particularly young men that had come from all over the world to find a new life. Most of them wanted to be ranchers and ended up working in the coal mines. Some families had started moving into the area, and it was starting to become quite a thriving little community as well. On April the 29th, 1903, 90 million tons of limestone came off the eastern face of Turtle Mountain in the small mining community of Frank. It partially buried the mining community that lay at the base of Turtle Mountain. Approximately 76 people were killed in the landslide, making it the deadliest landslide in North American history. Most of the people that were killed in the 1903 Frank Slide were never recovered. So the slide itself is like a large monument, a memorial to those people. Some people have mentioned that they felt like they felt somebody passing them, particularly along what we call the Old Frank Road, which is down where most of the homes were that were buried in the 1903 Frank Slide. They feel a sense of somebody being there, or a sense of a tragic loss. People are amazed when they come to see the Frank Slide. The area here, particularly what I noticed that fascinates them, is the absolute power of Mother Nature. The rocks were traveling at speeds of up to 120 kilometers an hour. It wiped out the part of town that it buried within seconds and obliterated 76 lives just almost instantly. That kind of power amazes people, and when they see the depth of the rock and the area that it covered, it just fascinates them.
There is another, more personal ghost story that originates back in the town of Frank's mining heyday. It revolves around a young prostitute named Monty Lewis. Monty was very proud of her beauty and enjoyed taunting the local wives with tales of scandal about their husbands. She was also proud of the jewelry she wore. She was involved with a local miner, but the relationship was a stormy one. He was down on his luck and had been living off Monty's earnings, but his debt still grew. He wanted to pawn Monty's jewelry, but to her, vanity was more important than love. It is believed that in a fit of anger, he stabbed her 17 times. When Monty's body was found, her beloved jewelry was missing, along with her former lover. Since that day, people reported seeing a woman walking the streets of Frank, screaming as if she were in pain. Now that the town of Frank is gone, that screaming is heard among the rocks near Turtle Mountain, where the town once stood. The beautiful area around Frank Slide Rocks is popular among hikers and outdoorsmen. One young man made the unwise decision to climb Turtle Mountain alone with night approaching. His climb was successful, but as night fell, he found himself trapped at the summit with neither food or equipment. Shivering, he cried out for help to anyone who would hear him. His cries were indeed answered, not by anyone offering to help, but by an eerie, wailing figure standing on the rocks above him. Again, the hiker yelled into the darkness for help, but heard nothing in return, except the chilling sound of a woman wailing in agony. In spite of the darkness, the young man chose to make his way down Turtle Mountain. He would never forget the horrifying sounds he heard echoing through the mountains. Some claim the strange sound is nothing more than the wind rustling over the mountainside, but others swear it is Monty Lewis still crying out for justice. Frank Slide Rocks in Alberta is not just a tale of ghosts, but one of courage and the strength of human will. Seeing firsthand this devastating slide is overwhelming, especially when considering those who seem unable to leave. The historic Helmken House in Victoria, British Columbia, has been painstakingly restored and turned into an interactive museum. Here, patrons can wander through the house on a recorded guided tour heard over a headset. One visitor did just that. However, nowhere on the recording was there any mention of a mysterious figure often seen roaming throughout the house.
The Helmken House is one of the oldest and most distinguished homes in Victoria, British Columbia. The first owner, Dr. Sebastian Helmken, lived there with his wife and young daughter, Dolly, who would soothe him with song after a long, hard day. For years, their home was filled with love, laughter, and music. Perhaps it is the memory of that warmth which still keeps Dolly playing her piano for all who will listen.
We're here at Helmken House Historic Site in Victoria, British Columbia. It was built in 1852 by John Sebastian Helmken, who worked for the Hudson's Bay Company and eventually became quite active in politics. To his credit, he was largely responsible for helping BC become a part of Canada, so very influential in helping join the West to the East by bringing the railroad through the Rockies. Edith Louisa, or Dolly as she was known, was the other permanent resident of the home and the final resident before she passed away in 1939. Just a few years previous, she'd arranged with the provincial government to acquire the home, and it would be protected, and it opened actually as a museum in 1941. Helmken House is one of the oldest homes in British Columbia, open to the public, and a wonderful collection of antiques and history. But like myself and many others, this house is believed to be quite actively haunted by its former residents. The most commonly seen spirits in this house are Dr. Helmken himself, and the other one is, we think, Aunt Dolly.
Dr. John Sebastian Helmken set up house here in 1852 after his second marriage to the daughter of Governor Sir James Douglas. Dr. Helmken's only daughter, affectionately known as Aunt Dolly, also lived with them. It was in this marvelous parlor where she sat and played the piano for hours at a time. After a long day of working with the sick, Dr. Helmken liked nothing more than to listen to Aunt Dolly play. In the mid-1800s, medicinal tools were still fairly rudimentary and often hard to come by, making a doctor's job very difficult. Many battles for life were often tragically lost to death. Listening to Aunt Dolly's beautiful music helped ease the pressure and stress which confronted Dr. Helmken daily. The sound of her music was indeed therapeutic for him.
Some of the encounters are fairly benign, but some of them are quite shocking because people never really expect to encounter what they do in this house aside from a nice historical tour through an old house.
Upon visiting the museum, another visitor would discover a piece of history which will remain with her forever. As the visitor approached the master bedroom, her path was obstructed by the spirit of Dr. Helmken. When she turned to run, she encountered the apparition of Aunt Dolly. Although the spirits of the Helmken house seem to welcome visitors, there are certain rooms that they would prefer left unoccupied.
The piano has actually been known to play by itself, although of course there is someone playing it, but no one can see that person. And we suspect perhaps that it could be his daughter, Dolly. It's one of the more pleasant encounters that you can have in this house because the music is actually quite well played.
Visions of these spirits are not reserved only for patrons. Many of the museum's staff have also had their own encounters, with several sightings of the home's original occupants. While rearranging one of the museum's display rooms at the end of the day, a custodian's work was interrupted by the faint sounds of music drifting throughout the house. When she arrived in the parlor, no one was there, but the subtle melodies continued to resonate throughout the room. In the past, Aunt Dolly's music healed her overworked father, and today she still offers her sweet remedy to all who enter. The oldest house in British Columbia, which still rests on its original plot, has been preserved for future generations to visit, still holding the beloved memories of the original family that lived there. Perhaps the Helmkens linger on in spirit to relive the love and joy they once shared within these historic walls. Thunder Bay's Trowbridge Falls are a pristine natural environment, but the area is also the location of many unnatural occurrences. A visitor came to the park to enjoy a summer hike. As he walked on, he heard what sounded like footsteps behind him. Suddenly, someone pushed him. Just as he was regaining his balance, another push almost knocked him over. When he looked around, no one was there. Slowly, he continued his walk until he saw two apparitions firmly blocking his path. The frightened visitor did not hesitate. He ran away as quickly as he could.
Trowbridge Falls was formed over 10,000 years ago from the melting ice caps in Minnesota. Today, this picturesque wonder of nature is part of a provincial park in Thunder Bay, Ontario. The park is an attraction to outdoor enthusiasts, thrill seekers, and paranormal researchers.
This location has become a popular destination for risk takers, a place to tempt fate for the sheer thrill and rush of excitement. Some gather here as part of adolescent initiations. They bolster their courage and jump from the highest point, diving into the beckoning waters below. Others congregate here not to tempt fate, but to succumb to it. A place where life and death converge. Many bodies have washed up on these shores, blatant reminders of life's fragile nature. Perhaps it is these fallen souls who have contributed to the spiritual activity in this area today. However, this site, as beautiful as it is, has a harsh reputation as well. Trowbridge Falls has claimed the lives and souls of numerous people.
I can be honest, last year we did have a death up here in the park. There have been other deaths with the river, with drownings and stuff. So who knows, maybe there are ghosts walking around in this park.
One woman who frequents Trowbridge Falls is now reconsidering her daily jogging routine. Early one Saturday morning, during her regular daily run, she felt an evil presence, as though she were being stalked. A shiver ran up her spine. She continued with her jog, hoping this unsettling feeling would go away, but it only got worse. The jogger was shocked to see a spirit appear, and then another. The woman froze with terror. She bowed her head, tensed her body, and braced herself. As quickly as it had come, the uneasy feeling disappeared. The jogger quickly left, terribly frightened and more than a little shaken. Trowbridge Falls and its surrounding area are also a popular place for young lovers to meet, although some rendezvous turn into affairs they prefer not to remember. One evening, a couple drove to the park's campground for a romantic getaway. They shut the car off and began to talk. As the two continued their conversation, they heard and felt a thump on the outside of the car. They chose to ignore it. Soon after came a second thump, which they also ignored. The car began to shake. Thumps from outside the vehicle grew louder, as if someone or thing was hitting the car over and over again. The two were trapped in the car. Then suddenly, the disturbance subsided. Fear gripped the couple, and rather than investigate what had happened, they made a quick exit from the park. Could the many tragic accidents which have occurred over the years be what keeps these thrill-seeking spirits lingering here, playing mischievous games with visitors, and searching for eternal excitement on the shores of Trowbridge Falls? An employee who regularly conducted tours of the courthouse came in early to make sure everything was in order for the day's groups. Little did she know that the day that had begun like any other would not end that way. As she checked the main area of the courthouse, she thought she heard a loud banging coming from the bathroom. A moment later, the noise stopped. Again, the banging sound returned. This time, she was sure of it. She rushed over to the area where the eerie noise was coming from, but saw nothing.
This grand old courthouse in St. Andrews by the Sea, New Brunswick, stands as a monument to Canada's harsh judicial past. This particular court was one of the last Canadian courts to execute prisoners by hanging, and it seems as though one of the hanged has returned.
The spirit that dwells within the halls of the Charlotte County Courthouse is suspected to be Thomas Hutchings, a convicted murderer from years past. Thomas's tale began when he offered to walk a woman home after a midday social gathering. The two stopped in a clearing, and Thomas made advances towards the woman. True to her virtue, she pushed Thomas away. He became infuriated. This was the last time the woman was seen alive. Thomas was charged with murder and was to be tried in this very courthouse. He awaited his verdict and was found guilty. Thomas was sentenced to death by hanging and would become the last criminal in Canada's history to be subjected to such harsh punishment. When the group arrived, the tour guide led them around the courthouse, explaining various aspects of Canada's judicial history. One visitor decided to stay behind, wanting to explore this fascinating place on his own. He could not have anticipated what he found. As the group continued their tour, another visitor stopped to admire some old photos hanging on the wall. Suddenly, a handprint appeared on the velvet. Terrified, the woman left the building, unable to continue the tour.
This particular building, our Charlotte County Courthouse, I do believe very strongly to be haunted by him. I don't have any proof that it is him, but the funny thing is, not all the time, but quite often when we talk about him, different things will happen in this building.
No one thought anything of the diminishing numbers of the group, assuming the others had preoccupied themselves in other parts of the courthouse. The tour continued into the building's archives. An elderly gentleman lagged behind to review some old city maps by himself. But his concentration was broken when he heard footsteps above him. He was in fact not alone. Frightened, the gentleman fled the building. Outside, he saw the missing members of the tour group standing some distance away from the courthouse. Each one had a different story to tell about their encounter with the spirit of Thomas Hutchings. This particular tour had become one they would never forget. The Charlotte County Courthouse in New Brunswick is still a working courthouse. However, tours are made available to those who wish to explore this historic building. Perhaps the long-dead Thomas Hutchings roams the courthouse seeking either justice or revenge. We may never know. But those who encounter him never forget their tour of this wonderful place. In Lake Manitoba, near Manipogo Beach, something very unusual lives beneath the waters. An artist planned to spend the day at the beach, but her agenda would soon be altered after having a hair-raising encounter with a local legend. She placed her beach blanket on the ground and began to sketch. Soon, she could no longer resist the inviting waters. As she swam, it seemed as if something was following her. Then, just as she raised her head out of the water, she saw Manipogo, the legendary lake monster of Manipogo Beach. Frantically, she swam from the creature, but it pursued her relentlessly. Swimming even harder, she eventually lost the monster, or it simply gave up. Picking up her belongings, she left Manipogo Beach, leaving behind the mysterious water creature.
Sea creatures, sea serpents, and gigantic lake monsters exist as unresolved global phenomena. While sightings of these mythical aquatic creatures are scarce, Lake Winnipeg's Manipogo has been seen emerging from its pristine waters on many occasions.
We were out fishing in the Manipogo lake. The water was calm, and there I heard a noise. And I said to my husband, "What the heck is that?" So he turned around and looked, and we seen this great big wave of water. When it got just about across from us, I could see this pole, looked like a pole, and it looked like a horse's head on it. It was going towards the beach where the kids always swims. It got close to the beach where the water got shallow, and it went down, and we never seen it again. Then we got talking to somebody, people from Manipogo there, and I forget what his name was. Like, he'd take care of the grounds there. And he turned around and he said this thing had been seen before there. And they called it the Manipogo.
Over the years, many witnesses have seen this frightening creature. As a young man walked along the beach, he stopped to skip stones, but his pastime disturbed something in the water. The young man could not believe what he was seeing. As the Manipogo surfaced, he fled to tell the authorities of what he had just witnessed.
Manipogo is part of the tradition and the history of that region of Manitoba. The area where Lake Winnipegosis blends with Lake Manitoba has been host to many sightings of the lake monster. The pin of the municipality has Manipogo on it. Manipogo is now the name of the provincial park, a very beautiful beach and region for camping and spending the summer. In fact, you can go up to the beach and campground during the summer and at the concession stand get a Manipogo burger.
A local fisherman who had often come to the lake had heard about the legend of the Manipogo, but never took it seriously until this day. He loaded his canoe with his fishing gear and set out onto the water. As he prepared his fishing rod, he saw something stir in the water, something he had never seen before. He quickly reached for his camera and proceeded to take a picture. However, it seemed that the Manipogo wished to keep its mystique and swam towards the fisherman's canoe to startle him. Frightened, the fisherman's first reaction was to drop his camera and try to ward off the oncoming lake monster with his oar. The fisherman felt a retreat was in order and furiously paddled away from the creature. This unsuspecting fisherman now had a new tale of how he was the one that got away.
In the 1960s, there was actually a government-funded expedition to try and locate the Manipogo monster. This was spurred in part by the research of a zoologist named Dr. McLeod, who believed there was enough circumstantial evidence and some partial bones and other evidence that suggested a large creature did in fact exist in the lake. And through the cooperation of the Manitoba Department of Trades, was taking individuals into the lake to look for it, and they spent a number of weeks combing the lake for definite evidence and definite proof. Unfortunately, they didn't find anything. So although we had enough evidence to warrant a provincial investigation by the government, nothing was seen and the matter was dropped.
A scout of the lake proved unsuccessful for zoologists and fishermen. They did not see the Manipogo that day. But be prepared when visiting Manitoba's Lake Manipogo to keep a camera close and running shoes closer. Edward Hopkins left Ontario in 1882 and migrated west, settling in Moose Jaw. Edward was elected to the House of Commons and helped establish schools and churches in his community. In 1889, Edward Hopkins married Miss Minnie Latham and built this remarkable home for her in the heart of the city. A couple came to the Hopkins Dining Parlor in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan to enjoy a relaxing meal. A candle was lit for ambience and the mood was set. As the couple looked over the menu, the young woman saw something out of the corner of her eye. But it became difficult for the couple to relax with their meal after they witnessed an apparition. Hopkins Dining Parlor is one of Moose Jaw's most paranormally active locations.
Built in 1905, Hopkins Dining Parlor in Moose Jaw is one of Saskatchewan's most unique restaurants. With its ambient Victorian decor, antique furnishings, great prime rib, and delicious seafood, most patrons continue to come back, and some have never left.
Some years later, Minnie died, and her funeral was actually held in the Hopkins family home. And to this day, it seems she has never left her beloved house.
Hi, my name is Gladys Pierce, and I'm the owner of Hopkins Dining Parlor here in Moose Jaw. We changed it to a restaurant in '79, and it's a beautiful old house, even if there is a ghost in it. Many things have happened here that are quite strange. I have heard footsteps many times, and when I hear the footsteps and I'm alone here, I try not to go up to see what it is. I just accept that there is a ghost here. I believe it's Mrs. Hopkins.
One of the restaurant's chefs arrived at the Hopkins Dining Parlor early to open up. and as usual, she headed into the kitchen to begin the day's preparations. The chef prepared the daily specials, making sure everything was perfect. She thought she heard a noise from upstairs. It sounded like footsteps. She was certain that she heard the sound of footsteps. However, as soon as she left the kitchen, they stopped. Returning to her preparations, she heard the footsteps a second time. But she was determined to locate the source of the sound. She did, seeing for the first time the ghost of Minnie Hopkins.
Footsteps are heard. Actually, a lot of times in the daytime we hear them up here, walking across the floors. Some of the experiences the employees have had is they have seen a woman in the downstairs washroom.
This old building has been home to a great many eerie occurrences. In a single evening, it's not unusual for one to have several encounters with the unexplainable. That you can see Minnie wandering from room to room, this her form, and perhaps a home. And some you may even be playing the piano in one of Hopkins' dining rooms. Hopkins' dining room was the home of Edward and Minnie Hopkins. Today, patrons come for more than just the great food. On top of catching a glimpse of Minnie's ghost, many guests have been entertained by her playing as well. Some 60 years after her death.